Some weeks ago I met Ben for lunch and pitched the idea for this. I honestly wasn't sure if he liked the idea because of the software delivery content or if he just really likes poker and wanted to hear me talk about that. So, yep, my name's Mark. I'm a software developer based here in Manchester, but I live in the .NET world, so that's why you might not know me. I spend most of my time developing, but I also, I'm an advocate of XP and Agile type practices, so TDD, continual small refactoring, continuous integration, and small releases early and often. And I run a number of training workshops and coach teams along those certain things as well. So some things in this talk are probably from that point of view, more from the coding aspect. And yeah, poker. So quick show of hands, who's heard of poker? Excellent start. Okay, so keep your hands up if you know how to play poker. Yeah, have played poker lots. Right, okay, so I don't need to go into the basics of it. You all know the gist of it, so I don't need to go in there. For the purpose of this evening, if I say poker, I'm referring to Texas Hold'em mainly. Is that familiar to us all? Yes? Yeah. No? Okay.
So that's the one you see the three of the cards or whatever, is it?
Yeah, so yeah, you get dealt 2 cards, and then there's a round of betting, 3 cards go in the middle, another round of betting, another card, another round of betting, and a 5th and final card, and then you make the best 5-card hand out of all 7 available to you. Okay? So, yes, so what's poker got to do with software? Poker is a game of skill with statistical variance inside it. And statistical variance is referred to by humans as luck or chance. Okay? Let me repeat that. It's a game of skill with elements of chance. If it was just a game of chance, then you wouldn't see the same faces at the final table of the World Series of Poker every year. But you do. You get repeat winners and you get repeat finalists. You don't get that in Monopoly, for example, where no one has ever won Monopoly Championship twice in a row or come close. I hope, at the time of writing. I'm going to argue this evening that software development is a game of skill with elements of chance, with elements of variation in it. And furthermore, it's also a game of imperfect information. Now, poker professionals have developed strategies and methods for coping with this variance. Good evening. For coping with this this variance and exploiting it, and perhaps we could learn something from that. And that's why. Do I have anything else? Yeah. Well, final thing to say. A lot of the variance that comes from, in terms of software development and delivery, is the fact that people make it, and people have good days and bad days, right? You know, it's a bad day if you didn't get much sleep last night, and some days you wake up and you're on fire and everything falls into place. You can't always predict how much output you're going to have in a day, for example. So that's where the variation comes from. Are there any questions so far? Just feel free to interrupt at any point and put a hand up. Okay. Another reason why, game theory. So, in the 20s, was it? John von Neumann first sort of coined the term. And then it got a little bit more popular, and obviously I got John Nash that came along later. And this simplified model of game theory and how people make decisions gave us a better understanding of economics and furthered us there. So using some of the things from poker as a model, the software, we've got a simplified version of it to make our decisions. I will argue that software is going to be more complicated. There's more variables going on, and there's more dependencies. But all models are abstractions by definition, right? All models are wrong, some models are useful. One further thing to say, we've got a metaphor here. So when we're learning about a new concept, an approach to learn quicker is to find ways that it's similar to something else that you already understand. And then that allows you to transfer your knowledge a little bit more. And in the examples where it doesn't fit, you file those as an exception. But try this next time you're learning something new. Apply it to something that you already know and think about how it contrasts. It's quicker than starting from first principles with every subject. Furthermore, metaphors run deeper throughout our understanding and our thinking and our behaviour than we often give them credit for. In this book, the authors look through the research and they show that it's inbuilt in our understanding and our language. Let me show you. There's an extended metaphor running through this, and it's not just a literary device. It's not just for poetry or for prose sake to give it more texture and more feel. It's actually something that's fundamental. Can anyone spot what the extended metaphor is here?
Building.
Yeah. And this is how we often think about knowledge. We think about it's something to be constructed and that we build upon. We don't really talk about sort of pruning our knowledge or anything else like that. It's all construction metaphors. So let me give you an example of how this can influence us. What's the extended metaphor here?
Where's military?
Yeah, military. Combat. What's the subject we're talking about here, do you think?
Argument?
Debate. Yeah. So there's the metaphor, the attacking, the war, the military. And this does us a disservice with debate, because we enter a debate thinking that our aim there is to win, to beat our opponent, and to convince everyone else that we are right. But the true thing that we should be after with a debate is to work out where we've got incorrect assumptions, to further our own understanding and everybody else. But when we think about debate like this, then we go at it. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, stolen from a different talk I do, but I thought it was kind of applicable there for the metaphor there. And one final deviation before we actually get into poker. Hands up if you've heard of Knevin. Okay, just the one. This is a large topic on its own, so I'm going to gloss over this very quickly. However, the point of Knevin is it's a Welsh word meaning habitat. It's a sense-making framework. The idea being that there are different problem domains, there are different types of problem, and different types of problem require different types of approaches to solve them. Okay? The four basic domains is the obvious. So if you have a problem here, it's of the category, my bicycle no longer provides propulsion when I move forward. You look down, the chain has fallen off, cause and effect are well understood, you know how to fix it. This is the world of best practice. Complicated in the top right is where cause and effect are well understood, the rules are well understood, but by subject matter experts. So a good example for this, for software developers, is say you're making accounting software, tax law and whatnot, you probably don't know a lot about that, but an accountant would. So you could have a conversation with a domain expert and they could tell you what kind of rules and what kind of things you need to be aware of and what you should build into your product. Complex, in the top left, is where cause and effect are understood, but in retrospect. You can't really predict what's going to happen. And the example that's always given for this is Flickr. The history of it's not really a thing much these days, but it used to be the premier photo sharing website. How did it start? Anyone know the history? It was an online game. The founders set out to make an online game. The photo sharing aspect of it was an attempt to spread the word. So the idea was, we'll create this mechanism where you can take a photo in-game of your avatar or whatnot and share it with your friends, and that will make them want to play the game. And then people started sharing their cat and their breakfast and all the other crap they did, and they went, there's a product here that we didn't realize. So they made a really easy to use and effective photo sharing system, and people used it. But they couldn't predict that that was going to happen in the first place. It just happened. Right? The final domain to talk about is chaos. That's where cause and effect aren't necessarily well understood, and your best action is to act. Act first and ask questions later. This is the house is on fire kind of territory. You don't really spend much time trying to get to the root cause of why your house is on fire whilst you're inside it. Now, the reason why I bring all this up, because it doesn't sweet bugger all to do with poker, but I'm going to say this a lot tonight, and it's that it doesn't matter which context you're in as long as you're acting accordingly. In the middle, there's this chasm of this thing, and this is the notion in Knevin of disorder. And that's where you're trying to apply best practice things in a complex domain. Or you've got a brain dead simple thing to do, like install WordPress and get a theme set up, and you insist on well, we're going to be lean about this, and we're going to plan the sprints, and we're going to do this, and we're going to get all this. It's like, just install the bloody thing. It's been done a million times. We know how to do it. And part of tonight's talk on poker is about situational awareness and knowing what context you're in and why you are going to be picking the paths that you go. And that's why I've laboured this point. I also wanted to get this slide in. This fella here is the CEO of Shopify, in case anyone wasn't aware of him. I also played a lot of StarCraft in my youth as well as a lot of poker, so... Right. The most important thing, we're finally on to the bit about poker. So if you're going to play successfully, you can only have long-term success if you pay attention to your bankroll. And what that means is you never have too much riding on a risk, because when the risk doesn't play out in your favour, it's not damaging to you and you can carry on. So what this means is, like, if you're playing at a table where you're worried about losing a hand, because if you lose that hand, it's going to be critical to your ability to eat for the next month, you should not be playing at that stakes. And this is the genesis of the talk. This is how it started. Some, God knows how many years ago, I was having a chat with an old Ruby user group attendee. And we were in the pub and we'd had several drinks, as Ash and I like to do. And he was bemoaning how a lot of companies he saw basically putting all of their bankroll, all of their risk in a single project, in a single feature, and putting so much emphasis on this and just like not spreading the risk. And that was the spark that I was like, oh yeah, and they do all these other things that is just insane practice in poker. You would never hear of it. It seems to be par for the course in business, when at the end of the day, it's all just risk management. Okay, anti-pattern number 1. Following on from the camera thing, one way to play. It's just not true. For the context of this, let's consider sit and goes. Do you know what sit and go is? Okay, it is a single table tournament. Up to 10 people will play. And the winner is the person that has got all of the chips left at the end. So you put in an amount, £5 or whatever, and that goes into the prize pool. And if there's 10 players, it will probably play the payout for the top 3, where the first place gets the lion's share, second slightly less, third probably get their stake back. Okay? It's a winner-take-most kind of scenario. It follows the standard idea of poker where you've got a compulsory bet, either the blinds or the antes, to get the action going, to make it worth playing a hand. But so that the the game doesn't last all night, the blinds go up every either 15 minutes or 10 hands or whatever, it doesn't matter. But it means that at later stages of the game, the compulsory bets that you have to make are a large proportion of your stack. So you have fewer decisions to make. In the early game, the blinds are small compared to your stack. And this means that you can play speculative hands. So these are hands where you're not likely to make a good, to hit the flop well, to make a good hand most of the time. But when you do, you've got a lot of power. You are very, very likely to win considerable amounts. Okay? So the risk reward is high. So you can afford to play that 7-6 suited. And if it misses the flop completely, you throw it away, it's fine, because the small risk is fine, is worth it. But if you do that in the later stages, because you're going to not make these hands so often, that's not a winning strategy. In the later game, it's pretty much all in or fold. Now, there's the bit in the middle. This is when the game changes a lot again. Because of the payout structure, imagine a situation where there's 4 players, 2 have most of the chips, and 2 others have very little. So one of the things they do is they're just hoping that the other player goes out before them. They're not playing to win anymore, they're playing to not lose. Okay? So these are 3 very different ways of playing that are all perfectly valid and perfectly make sense, and how you should adjust based on the situation you're in. On software, and this is the 3X model by Kent Beck. He's been talking about this lately. And again, it's this idea of context. Consider this line here, the age, the maturity of a product or of a feature. In the early days, when we're at the explore stage, we don't know what we're building. We don't know if what we're building may or may not be useful to people. We might not get it right. So what we can do in the explore stage is make lots of little bets. Okay? We can spend a week or so putting out a feature. Did people buy it? Did it get some traction? Yes, it did. More often than not, no, it didn't. Right, let's scrap it. Let's delete all the code. And because these are experiments, these are throwaway things, these are just testing the waters, you don't spend a lot of time refactoring it to be glittering code that's going to last a lifetime. You don't do tons and tons of rigorous testing. You work in a very, very different way. And you've got a lot of ambiguity at this stage. So your feature starts to get a little bit of traction. You start to get some users and some value out there. So then you move into the expand part of 3X. If you're in the expand area, then you're looking for patterns. So, okay, well, they loved this bit, so let's do more of that. Let's down on that. And you're working out the best architecture to fit these types of features, and you're going on that. And you come to maturity with extract. And this is where you're on a pretty well-trodden path, where you know that if you invest $1, you get $3 out. Now you're thinking of terms of uptime, of stability. Now you're thinking about making sure that your code is going to be in for the long haul, and making those good approaches to make it clean code and better. The risk profile is different in Explore and Extract. He says, looking at his notes, in Explore, it's known as convex risk, okay? Small risk, high potential reward. As you get to Extract, you're in concave. Think banks, all right? Security breach on a bank will cost them billions, literally billions, so they're more risk averse. Now, developers have got personalities, and they like and enjoy different things. Poker players have got different personalities, they like and enjoy different things. I don't like sit and goes, because I don't like the push-fold nature at the end. So I play a different version of the game called the cash game, which doesn't have this. Software developers might like the iteration and the experimentation of the explore stage. They might thrive on that. If they do, fine. Bear this in mind when you're looking for a job. Bear this in mind when you're putting together a team of people that are going to be working in a certain area. So you've got people that love the experimentation stage, and you put them in a support team on Extract. They're going to hate it. They're going to leave. They're going to have a bad time. But there's lots of us that all like different things. Now, you might be the kind of person that likes all of it a little bit at a time. And again, that's cool. So that's part number one. There's no one way to play. Depends where your product is. Anti-pattern number two. But I won the hand. Anyone play poker and heard this? It's like, you shouldn't have done that. So, but I won the hand, so therefore it's okay. Right? So let's think of an extreme example of this. The worst hand possible is 7-2 offsuit. The best hand possible is a pair of aces as a starting hand, okay? If you get those aces all in, you're going to win the hand 88% of the time, okay? And indeed, so you should. You should try and get those aces all in pre-flop. However, just over 1 in 10 times, you're not going to win the hand. Does that mean you were wrong to have taken that action? Does the person that gets lucky for that 1 in 10 time, does that make them right to have called it that instance? The answer is no. This is about being results oriented in the wrong way. So, I don't know what retrospective is. Yeah. So you have your retrospective, you're looking back on how the project or how the last week, the iteration's gone. And you say, oh, I went, wow, that was great. We did everything right. Is that exactly how it was going to play out all the time? Or is that one possible scenario in lots of things that could have happened? You can get away with doing incredibly risky stuff. And there's going to be someone out there, because of the law of large numbers, that's gotten away with doing risky stuff their entire career. And everyone thinks they're golden just because they're on that aspect of being lucky. Anyone see the Darren Brown, to illustrate what I mean, anyone see the Darren Brown episode where he sent a letter to a lady saying, here's the winner for this week's horses. And then the second week, here's the winner for this week's horses. And the third week, here's the winner. In 8 weeks, she got a letter saying, this horse is going to win the 3:30 at Kempton. And it always did. How the bloody hell did he do that? He sent a letter to like 2,000 people for every permutation. And the only one that you saw was this one person there. Okay? And that's that one person that's been reckless all of the time. But just because they've been lucky every time before does not mean they'll be lucky again. So, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get unlucky. When you're reviewing what you've done, take it with a pinch of salt. Think, hang on, what did the events that occur, how likely were they to happen? Were they predictable? Were they repeatable? And think about that again when you're making your decisions. Don't get angry when things don't go your way. Sometimes you just grab the wrong end of the stick, which leads me nicely on to anti-pattern number 3 of poker, tilt. This is why I cannot play for a living. I did briefly when I was a student. It was more lucrative than getting a job at a bar. But my profit graph went like this. A little bit up, a little bit up, a little bit up, a little bit up, a little bit. Bad day, boom, back to square one after 3 weeks of hard work. Tilt is what happens when, for a number of reasons. Maybe you've had a bad beat, maybe you've had a string of bad luck or something, but the effect is the same. You start making reckless and rash decisions. What's tilt in software? We missed that deadline. We need to cut a few corners to pick up some pace. Oh, we missed that deadline again. Oh, we need to cut a few more paces. Assuming that we're in the context that it's appropriate for, at least. It's the best way of spotting tilt. Be aware that it can happen. Don't think that you're immune to it. That's arrogant. But have some sort of a check or a system. There's a professional, I think it was Phil Ivey, who's got this rule that if he loses 2 big hands, 2 buy-ins, in any kind of online session that he's playing, that's the end of the session. Okay? Even if he's not necessarily on tilt then, he knows that this might trigger him. And it's far better to walk away from that, cool down, and come back a few hours later. And it's that. So think about the things that make you tempted to do something that you know is wrong. Think about them in advance so that you can see them coming. And agree with the team. If we find ourselves in this situation, we need to reevaluate. Because this is one of the success patterns of a good poker player, is having predictions and pre-decisions. Okay, so what do I mean? So prediction is, this player here is very loose. This means that if I make a raise, he's likely to call it no matter what. Right? But this player here isn't. And they're likely to fold lots. So if I raise this good hand, they're likely to call, they're likely to fold. So I want that. So that's my prediction. Now here's the pre-decision. If this person that doesn't play a lot of hands comes back at me, I'm getting the hell out of Dodge. Right? I'm not fighting with this hand. If the flop comes this way, I'm going to bet such and such. I'm going to bet for value, or I'm going to bet to bluff. And this is planned out before they see the flop. They don't make the decisions as they come. So we had a similar situation like this at work, where we were migrating a bunch of old users from one system to another. And it was risky, and we weren't sure how they were going to react and everything. So we set ourselves pre-decisions of, we'll migrate this number of users. If there's this percentage of help desk calls, we're fine with that because we're expecting some problems and we can manage that. But if it's higher, then it's not what we expected and we need to stop. And also, we're not going to get carried away because we're chasing this vanity metric of number of people migrated. And we're not going to get carried away. Now, what did happen was that some people got carried away anyway because it was going well, and they turned it up and things then started going not so well. So thank you very much for proving my point. That slide might have been useful to have while I was talking, but there we are. When you deploy something, what does success look like? Decide this beforehand, because when you try to decide have you been successful afterwards, you're going to try and make things up to make yourself feel better. Yeah, we did a good job there because of this thing. It's not what you were meaning to do. You should be, hitting that ball on the tennis court and saying it's going to go there, rather than it's just good enough to go there and hopefully. Is it likely to happen? How likely is it to happen? And what are your options if it's a fail or a success? And this is one of the issues that I've got with traditional roadmaps, is that there's only ever one path. We're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. There's no, we're going to do this, and if that's a massive success and bigger than our wildest dreams, we're going to do more of that. Or if this thing that we thought was great actually turns out to be a bomb, then, we shouldn't do this next thing. So think about options, think about plans. Review. How are we doing for time? All right. I lived with some people that play poker at university, and one player I knew would spend at least 25% of a session time. So if he played for an hour, he'd spend at least 15 minutes reviewing the hands that he played afterwards, looking for leaks. These are areas that where he's not playing very well, looking for areas of improvement. I thought he was insane. It's like, you get better at poker by playing more poker, right? If you're just spending your time looking at hands afterwards, you're not making any more money. What are you doing? What do you think happened? He got so much better, so much faster than I did, because he was constantly improving. And it was the things that he reviewed as well. He had a very effective way of doing this. He wouldn't just look at the big hands that he lost or the big hands that he'd won. He'd look at the hands that he won and went, right, did I win that because I was lucky, or did I win that because I was good? Same with that. He'd look for the small hands. He'd look for the small leaks, the ones that he'd just say, well, that hand there, 6-7 suited, appears to be losing me money in the first three positions, but not the last two, the last three. So I'm going to stop playing it there. And that's a really easy thing to just decide. Also, whilst he was playing, he made notes of the hands that were interesting, the hands that he wished he had more time. And then he went and discussed them with people afterwards. So when those situations came up again, it was all ready. And yeah, it absolutely destroyed me. So they use a piece of software called Poker Tracker, most people do, which gives you a ton of ways of looking at the stats and the history of what you've played. And this is one such thing. I'm not going to go into what all of these terms mean. All I'm going to say is we've probably got more in software. We've probably got more in software delivery and running a project. We just need to work out what's important to us and what we're looking at. Think of those measures and start collecting them and start refining them. And don't just look at this one big bad thing happened, how do we stop that happening again? Because it might just be a one-off. Right? Do not apply a systemic fix to a problem which is not systemic. You will do yourself harm. So Spartan 3, constantly fix the small leaks. Again, mentioned that he would look at all of these little problems, these little hands where he was just losing $1 every 100 hands by playing this one thing badly, small adjustment. The thing I can say to you in software is, how many of you have got a flaky test on CI that just fails 1 in 4 times? And then it takes a rerun and it costs a person doing that half an hour. I bet you, if you spent 2 hours looking at it, you could replace it with a faster test or a test that isn't flaky. And then you save the team half an hour here, half an hour there, all adds up. Just those the little things that you can just do that don't even require too much permission to do. Now this is a maybe pattern, and this is about scaling. Right? If you play online, you are not confined to a single table. You can open up a second one, or a third one, or a fourth one, or lots of them. Right? That's not photoshopped, that is real. Right? If you've got a software development team and you've got a product, you're not restricted to a single team. You can spin up a second one and they can work on the same code base. They'll work on the same product. Now in the early days of this, it starts to work. You effectively double the amount of work you can get through. It works until it doesn't. It's what you often find. Right? Here in the middle, there are kings. Here at the bottom, there are queens. Here up top, there are nines. And there might be a few other interesting hands that are going on that require your attention. Because of the variable nature, you can't guarantee that all of the hands that you want to play are going to come along in a nice distributed fashion. Sometimes they all come along at once. That means it divides your attention and you make mistakes. And then you lose a buy-in, and you lose a buy-in here and a buy-in there. All because you would have been able to handle them fine. Yeah. So I found this, that it was like, yeah, you can handle 2 tables and your hourly rate about doubles, and you can handle 4 tables and about not quite quadruples. Try to add 5, 6, losing money. So this happens with teams, right? A company goes through growth, add 1 team here, great, add another team there, Then all of a sudden there seems to be this tipping point where you start having problems and you get clashes, because all of a sudden they've all got a number 1 priority. They all come along at once. There's a big disaster. What would be a better use of the time? Strip away, if you can't handle this many tables, strip away 4 of them, so you can handle them. With that extra capacity that you've got, start looking for more lucrative games. Games where there's more novice players. Yeah? Because that hunt isn't urgent. It's an important task, because if you sit at an easier table, you're going to make more money. But you can delay that if something else urgent and important comes up. So if your teams are butting heads a lot, slow down a little bit and look for things that they can do which are important, not urgent, so that the flow of work doesn't end up crashing and distracting people. Why are you not clicking forward? Oops. The final thing, I said never fold aces pre-flop. Remember me talking about the bubble? And I think this is the story that made Ben say, oh yeah, I want to hear more about this. A situation that I heard of, and there's more of them, where a professional folded aces pre-flop in a tournament. Why would you ever do a thing like that? They were on the bubble, and it was on a multi-table tournament where you're talking about life-changing sums of money in the payout structure. They had a good chip advantage. They were looking healthy, and they had lots of people that were nervous on the table because they didn't have a lot, and they didn't want to be the next person out. They wanted to get in that cash. So this person that had lots of chips was able to bully them. They picked up aces. They looked at their hand. A small stack went all in. So they folded. Because they didn't want to knock that person out. And they didn't want to change everybody from being really, really skittish and folding to, so he could take a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there and a little bit there and a little bit there. So he folded it. And instead of having a quarter of the chips going into the final table, they ended up with half the chips because they kept the bubble for as long as possible. So a situation where you fold aces pre-flop. The example I've got for software on that is never duplicate code base. Never wholesale copy code. Never have two products that are the same code base running alongside. I found a situation where actually it was the correct thing to do. Because trying to maintain backwards compatibility for the old one was slowing us down so much in the new one. And we wanted to decommission this old site. And once we got enough people off, we could. Right? So we forked the code base, we left the old product running, and then we took the new one, and we could change all of the old bits that we needed to, that were getting in our way. Right? We accepted the fact that if a critical bug came along, it meant a fix in two places. Right? We looked at it and we thought, let's revisit all of the reasons why you should never duplicate a code base. And we enumerated all of the reasons. And then we went, okay, we accept that, we accept that. This is fine, we can do that. We did something which is counter to our standard practice and the standard good practice that's received wisdom, but we did so knowingly. That's why it was okay. That is the end of that little ramble. Thank you for being a test audience. Cool.